Good morning, everyone. How are you today? It's such a beautiful day out there, and I'm so glad that everyone is here. Even though it's cold, it's supposed to get up to 50 sometime today, so that's a good thing. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I'm Tim Krause, and I am this morning's worship associate. Our church's mission is to welcome all with love, to support learning and spiritual growth, to serve our wider community, and to work for justice, equity, and inclusion. Please make sure that you read the announcements, not only the announcements in the insert, but the announcements on the inside of your order of service, because there's important information there. And most importantly for the insert is how we're going to conduct our offerings, and so that you understand how to give to First Unitarian Church. I'm not going to go over that in detail or anything because we've done that in the past, but this is a pretty complete description of what you can do to give an offering to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. The flowers today are donated by Patty and Scott Kelly, and in honor of our beloved church family. And we thank you, Patty and Scott. That's very appreciated. And by way of another announcement, there will be a forum, one more forum, to discuss the bylaws revisions that you've received in email in January. And that's going to be held this coming Tuesday, February 27th at 7 p.m. by Zoom. And then we are going to have a vote on these proposed bylaw amendments at a special congregational meeting on March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. So before we begin our service, let's take a moment to wave to the people watching at home, and then we're going to have a chance to greet each other, and I will call us all back with the singing bowl.
Shall I?
Yes.
I shall. Jane Kay will light the chalice for us this morning. And for the chalice lighting, we have a responsive reading. You have a printed version in your order of service. I'll read the worship associate words, and of course you're invited to read the responses. We are a strong and justice-seeking people. We aspire to a better world where neighbors are beloved and the same roads lie open to all.
We yearn after justice and compassion. We test old hierarchies and hate.
Even in such aspiration, though, we understand that this is work which will prove neither easy nor comfortable.
Which look exactly like yesterday's. This is precisely what makes old habits comfortable.
And it therefore follows, where yesterday leaves something to be desired, today must change. Such change is a rigorous quest which begins with us.
We understand the challenges, new paths lead through shadows, unfamiliar ground, new vibrations, new practices, bring feelings of discomfort, even risk.
Old set ways lead down a road that's paved and smooth. Familiar patterns which we know by heart are easily followed with our eyes closed. But we resolve to open our eyes. We resolve to live in courage, change old ways, do what has not yet been done. Let us sing the praises of sacred discomfort then. That is the door by which we enter a new and better realm. And I invite you to stand in body or spirit as you're inclined and join in singing our opening hymn, number 12, O Life That Maketh All Things New.
Yeah? Good. Guys, you want to come over? Come on over. Yeah. I Am Love, a book of compassion by Susan Verde and art by Peter H. Reynolds. What do you think it's about? When I see someone going through a storm of hurt and unfairness, of anger and sadness, when the sun disappears and the skies grow dark, and I see there is fear, I ask myself, what can I do to help let the light back in? So during a storm, there's anger. Can everybody make an angry face? Would somebody like to put anger up here? Because that's a storm feeling. How about unfairness? Unfairness. Oh, I just don't like it when people are unfair. And that's kind of a storm feeling, isn't it? And hurt. That doesn't feel good. That's a storm feeling. And how about sadness and fear? Do you want to both go up? Or Sissy can do yours too? Yeah? Unfairness, anger, hurt, fear, and sadness are all feelings that make us sad and kind of, it feels like a storm. I put my hands on my heart. Can everybody put their hands on their heart? And listen. That is where I find the answer. I have compassion. I have tenderness. I am love. I can listen and not say a word. I can be there. Love is being present. I can hug and hold and say, everything will be all right. Love is comfort. I can speak softly and choose my words and actions carefully. Love is gentle. I give thanks for all I have and am able to share. Love is gratitude. I can keep my mind and body safe and healthy. Love is taking care of me. I can express what's important to me. Love is creative. I can know that no one is perfect. Love is understanding. I can do my best to make things better when something is wrong. Love is effort. I can celebrate those I've loved before. Love is remembering. I can find goodness in a kind word, a helping hand, or a shared smile. Love is tiny gestures. I can breathe in the air that the whole world shares and know all creatures are made from the very same stardust. Love is connection. When the clouds and for me, I know there is something I can do. I can let my heart lead the way. I am love. You are love. Okay, what are some of the things that are love? Creative? Yeah? You're being creative and making and doing fun things. Comfort. You love and comfort other people. Understanding one another. Being gentle. Connection. Connection. Compassion, where you, whoa! And you know what? When these things happen, we can show our love, can't we? We can come up and like Yvonne here, she's helping, and we can work together and figure out how this all works. Yvonne. well, but that's okay, isn't it? Because we're all here together and we are fixing it. That's why we all need to be with one another and to help. Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. You are proving what love really is. Compassion when we love one another. Tenderness. We understand and we are tender and gentle with one another. We listen to one another, don't we? We listen. Come on. Yeah, listen. And effort. We put effort into our love and caring. Gratitude, we're thankful for what we have. And we remember those that we love. You know what love really is? Love is you. Love is me. And love is being together. I'm going to ask you to do one last thing, okay? I want you, Sherry has really long hair that keeps getting in the way. I want you to put your hand on your heart, and I want you to look down, and I want you to breathe through your nose. Imagine all that love in your heart. Thank you so much. You were such a big help. We're going to go to school now, okay? So we're going to say goodbye.
Before we do our Black History moment, I wanted to call your attention to a couple of changes in the order of service so that you're not confused. The hymn number 1028, The Fire of Commitment, is going to happen after the sermon, not before the sermon. And the responsive reading that's listed after our first few singers sing was actually done for our chalice lighting. There were two confusions there, so I want to make sure you understand that as we go through the order of service. And also, our Share the Plate for this month is actually an organization that purchases, as soon as I can get the exact name here, the New Life Furniture Bank, which purchases furniture for people who need furniture in their housing. And we've been collecting money for them for this entire month, and this is the last Sunday that we do that. And once again, you can follow the directions on your insert as to how to give the Share the Plate to the New Life Furniture. Now for our Black History moment. And if you see there on the screen, last year I introduced us to Consuelo Clark. And Consuelo Clark is a very important person in the history of Ohio because she became the first Black female doctor in the state of Ohio. She was trained at the Boston University, but the most important thing about all of this is that she was raised in our congregation. And it's something that we need to celebrate because she was a product of this church. Both her parents, Peter and Frances Clark, who we talked about last week, had decided that even though they kept a membership in the AME church here in Cincinnati, the Allen Temple, they wanted their children to be raised as Unitarians. And Consuelo Clark was born in 1860, right before the Civil War, and she attended all of the RE classes here with our church throughout that time period until she was of age and went on to college. But one of the other things that Consuelo contributed to this community was that she was a champion of women's health, and she set up women's health clinics in Ohio, in Cincinnati in particular, before she moved on to Youngstown. And she was partly inspired by another member of our church, Elizabeth Blackwell. And if you remember, Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman to ever become a medical doctor in the United States. And because of that interaction with Elizabeth Blackwell and this congregation, Consuelo recognized that she could be a doctor as well. So it's an amazing story about women finding their own power and finding their own power inside the walls of our congregation, which is a wonderful story to be told. So, having said that, we are now moving on to our meditational song or from the first few singers. We're so very pleased to have Reverend Dennis McCarty with us today. He's become a good friend of our congregation over the last year and a half, and it's such a delight to have him back in the pulpit with us today. But before he gets up here, I want to read something that he is using as text for the sermon about DARVO. And I know that this might cause some pain for some people in our congregation, just to even hear this man's words. But these are quotes from Donald Trump's deposition for the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit. And they go as follows, and they're sort of scattered around that transcript. The reason E. Jean Carroll doesn't give more specifics is because it never happened. And she doesn't want to get caught up with the details or facts that could prove her wrong. She was promoting a really crummy book. You will see that it is a complete scam. Her lawyer is a political operative and Governor Andrew Cuomo crony who goes around telling people that the way to beat Trump is to sue him all over the place. She is suing me on numerous frivolous cases like this one, and the court system does nothing to stop it. E. Jean Carroll is not telling the truth. She is a woman I don't even know and would have nothing to do with even if I did know her, if I had a chance. I have to go through years of legal nonsense in order to clear my name of her and her lawyer's phony attacks on me. This could only happen to Trump. She said that I did something to her that never took place. There was no anything. I know nothing about this nut job. She is not my type. When I say she's not my type, I say she is not a woman I would ever be attracted to. It's not even meant to be an insult. This is just no way I would ever be attracted to her. And you, her lawyer, know it's not true too. You're a political operative also. You're a disgrace. I don't know this woman. I think she's a whack job. I think she's sick, mentally sick. She indicated that she loved it, okay? She loved it. I think she said it was very sexy to be raped. It's a big fat hoax. She is a liar and she's a sick person, in my opinion. Really sick. Something wrong with her. It is a hoax and a lie just like all of the other hoaxes that have been played on me for the past 7 years. I've had a lot of hoaxes played on me over the years, and this is one of them. The Russia hoax, the Ukraine hoax, the Mueller situation, the lying to the FISA court hoax, the lying to Congress many times hoax, by all these people, the scum that we have in our country. Mail-in ballots are very dishonest. E. Jean Carroll's attorney then asked, "Isn't it true that you sometimes voted by mail?" The defendant answered, "Sometimes I do, but I don't know what happens to it after you give it. I have no idea." And with that, we're going to have Reverend Dennis McCarty create a context.
Oh my, that was heavy stuff. I had underestimated the impact of those words. I mean, I put them on the paper. They're all quotes, but sitting out there, wow. So forgive me if that was a little overdone. I underestimated the possible impact there. But the point is, last fall, a jury decided unanimously that Donald Trump had sexually abused journalist E. Jean Carroll, and that in lying about it, he defamed her. And Trump continued to lie as that trial was going on, including in the deposition. So Carroll filed the second defamation lawsuit, and last month, that jury took less than 3 hours to award her another $83 million. And the point is, this case is a matter of public record and settled law, so it's fair game for a sermon. The lines are fuzzy between sexual, physical, and verbal abuse. E. Jean Carroll herself described what happened to her as physical abuse expressed in a sexual way, which rape often is. And then when she came forward with her story, it morphed into verbal abuse. And this morning's reading was made up of those quotes, some of that verbal abuse, not just against her, but also against her legal team and against other people on Trump's enemies list. Anyone can lose their temper and lapse into abusive language. And I have to admit that I have over the years. But there's a difference between just losing one's temper versus deliberate abuse as a strategic practice. And the key to both, of course, is to try to be self-aware and honest with ourselves when we get close to that line, and also aware when others are doing it, because there are patterns that are identifiable. University of Oregon psychology professor Jennifer J. Freyd specializes in abuse and the trauma it can cause, and in 1997 she wrote, and I'm quoting, "A frequent reaction of an abuser being held accountable is the DARVO response, D-A-R-V-O. DARVO stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. DARVO, close quote. And Freyd goes on to note that an innocent person will also deny wrongdoing, but there will be a difference between simple denial of wrongdoing versus abusing and attacking someone. Freyd writes, quote, "Actual abusers threaten, bully, and make a nightmare for anyone who holds them accountable. This includes threats of lawsuits, attacks on the whistleblower's credibility, and attempts to ridicule the whistleblower. The offender rapidly creates the impression that the abuser is the wronged party, while the victim or concerned observer is the real offender." Close quote. And subsequent research confirms that, one, DARVO is commonly used by perpetrators when confronted. Two, women are more likely to be targeted than men. And three, long-term exposure to DARVO causes increased perceptions of self-blame among those confronting the perpetrator. And when we observe this behavior then, it becomes important for us, even as bystanders, to remind the person being abused that they are not the crazy one. They are not the villain. There is abuse going on, and the victim is, in fact, the victim. And you can save a life by making that observation to somebody who's being abused. So, DARVO is a common tactic for abusers to avoid accountability, and the DARVO itself causes yet more harm. It is difficult to stop a chronic abuser from doing it, and that is precisely why we need to be aware of what's going on, and we need to name it when we see it. And Donald Trump's deposition is a textbook example. Trump fiercely denied that the sexual assault took place, which is fair enough. A person has a right to deny. But then he called E. Jean Carroll's honesty and even her sanity into question. She's just hyping her crummy book, he's claimed. She lied. She's mentally ill. She's a whack job, mentally sick, something wrong with her. And he also shamed her. He wouldn't be attracted to her in the first place, he said. She's not my type, as though that is the key measure of any woman's worth. And then, perhaps as the ultimate shaming tactic, he claimed that she loved the sexual abuse that he was claiming never happened. And as one expert puts it, this actually is classic DARVO. I didn't do it, but even if I did, it wasn't all that bad. Trump also attacked Carroll's attorney. "You're a political operative," he said. "You're a disgrace." And finally, multiple times, he declared himself the victim. This could only happen to Trump. This and all the other hoaxes that have been played on me by people he called scum. Now again, this is confirmed law. This is not a political issue. But to me, it is a human spiritual issue, according to my non-theistic take on what the word spiritual even means. It demands a psychological, spiritual examination. And as far as that goes, no pro-Donald Trump voter I've ever talked to has ever claimed that Trump is a person of strong or healthy moral character. Rather, they insist that they like his policies or that God often does God's will through flawed human beings. Now, that's the political side of things. That's not what this is about. That's a topic for a different day and a different place. Donald Trump's legal struggles are all marked by counter-accusations and insults directed toward his accusers, the judges trying the cases, and even their staff. And these DARVO tactics suggest also a psychiatric condition former associates and psychologists have associated with Trump, narcissistic personality disorder. Manya Wakefield, a specialist in cognitive behavioral therapy and trauma recovery, notes the frequency with which narcissists use DARVO to justify themselves and silence their victims. Quote, by crafting a fictional narrative that bears no resemblance to reality, they sow seeds of doubt. Bystanders regrettably accept the manipulator's lies as truth. Bystanders are likely to accept the manipulator's lies as truth. Meanwhile, the recipient of the abuse becomes a scapegoat and a target of vilification. Close quote. So victims begin to doubt or blame themselves for the conflict. And that actually is the goal of the person using DARVO tactics, to escape accountability on their end, to influence bystanders, and to induce shame, self-doubt, and self-blame in their victim. And all too often, it works. So this is a serious social issue. We see it all the time in politics. Perhaps most distressingly, it can also happen in church. I'll get back to that. In her article, Manya Wakefield notes that like other forms of what's called gaslighting, and that's very much in the language these days, DARVO, this is important, DARVO is generally perpetrated across a power imbalance. That is, the more empowered and privileged person uses it to maintain their power advantage and silence their critics. For example, I'm going to read 2 paragraphs from a stirring political speech from a couple of generations ago. Today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generations of forebears before us done time and again through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon our people. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny. From this day, we are standing up, and the heel of tyranny does not fit the neck of an upright man. From this day, from this hour, from this minute, we give the word of a race of honor that we will tolerate their boot in our face no longer. Now, if you're familiar with my book, A Gadfly Report, you may recognize this passage because I analyze this speech in detail. It talks about standing up with dignity and shaking off chain-clanking tyranny, but it's from Governor-elect George Wallace's 1963 speech, Segregation Now, Segregation Forever. He was defending Jim Crow segregation in the face of federal civil rights legislation. Very briefly, this speech declares racism to be freedom and integration to be tyranny. In DARVO fashion, Wallace attacks and shames integrationists, reversing victim and offender. Segregationists are an upright race of honor, shaking off the boot of tyranny, which is simultaneously in their face and on their neck, which is a remarkable accomplishment when you stop to think about it. Now, I don't know if George Wallace was a narcissist or whether Asa Earl Carter, who wrote that speech, was either, and I don't know whether either one abused their friends or family, but Wallace was a ruthlessly ambitious politician, and Carter was a fanatical white supremacist for whom even the Ku Klux Klan was not extreme enough. Wallace's speech was propaganda. And philosopher Jason Stanley's book, How Propaganda Works, describes propaganda as, quote, the employment of the language of an ideal to attack the ideal itself. The employment of the language of an ideal to attack the ideal itself, which is also a kind of DARVO. A broader study through history shows that DARVO does get used not just by abusers or narcissists, but also in creating propaganda. The constant is that it is used to maintain a power imbalance. Just by the by, when a gadfly report came out, multiple self-proclaimed gadflies reacted with outrage that I would compare their rhetoric with that of George Wallace, but the parallels are what they are. I had not yet studied propaganda or DARVO, but the mechanics, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, along with using the language of diversity and democracy to attack diversity and democracy, were plain to see. And that's why they were similar. And as far as that goes, generated outrage itself is often a DARVO tactic. Again, what separates DARVO outrage from the natural and understandable outrage of a person who's innocent but falsely accused are the insults, shaming, and reversal of victim and offender that go with DARVO outrage. It's one thing to say, damn it, I'm innocent. It's another to say, I'm innocent and you're crazy. I'm the victim and you're a tyrant. Okay, when we hear that, we need to take a hard look at the power differential behind it. What power differential is being maintained? For the record, this is not to say that every concern about the current direction of the Unitarian Universalist Association should just be dismissed, or that everyone who criticizes the UUA is a problem. I've criticized the UUA plenty. I think any thoughtful person can find something to criticize. You know, it's a large group, it is full of people, and something that's full of people is going to have problems. Okay, thoughtful people will disagree. But it is to remind us that some people do have more social privilege than others, both within Unitarian Universalism and in society as a whole. And when we see gaslighting and DARVO rhetoric in use across that power differential, again, we need to pay attention. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. There's a lot of it out there, both in the broader society and even some of it within Unitarian Universalism. And it's also worth going back and discussing that link between DARVO and narcissism. Most popular and social media discussions of narcissism treat it as though all narcissism is a malignant personality disorder, and it sometimes is. But narcissism is an aspect of human personality that is actually much broader and more complicated than just that. Like any other personality trait, narcissism exists across a wide spectrum. Narcissistic personality disorder is the extreme end of that spectrum, but in the middle and at the other end, what's called adaptive narcissism can be a good thing. Positive traits such as high self-confidence, self-reliance, and the ability to celebrate yourself, those can be good things. And furthermore, narcissism comes in many forms: overt, covert, antagonistic, communal, and of course, at the worst extreme, malignant. So, narcissism itself can be a complex topic, and we do need to keep an eye on the relationship between poorly adapted narcissism and abuse. In a fascinating book, When Narcissism Comes to Church, psychologist and spiritual director Chuck DeGroat provides a fascinating look at narcissism among clergy. And again, some forms of narcissism are well adapted and positive, while others are not. Ministry itself is very ego-intensive work. According to DeGroat, most ministers do test somewhere on the narcissistic spectrum. And for the record, I'm one of them. In my family of origin, I'm pretty confident that both my father and my older brother would have tested on the spectrum as overt narcissists. My father was a kindly and decent man, so he would have tested, I think, probably with what's considered adaptive narcissism, which is mostly positive. But my older brother, not so much. Growing up, his narcissism manifested not least in abuse against me. I spent the second half of my life coming to terms with the post-traumatic stress disorder that resulted from that abuse. And my brother and I are now estranged. I miss him, but I've had to accept that he is not about to change, and it's not healthy for me to be around him. Sometimes that's a sacrifice a person just has to make to survive and flourish. So the point is, gaslighting and DARVO are not abstract issues for me. I grew up with them. Though as a child, I could not yet technically name them. Possibly, though, because I was youngest and smallest, my narcissism resulted in introspection, self-examination, and a level of self-awareness. And according to DeGroat, that is the key to living with any strong personality trait in a healthy way: honesty, humility, and self-awareness. Of course, ministers are not the only people who test on the spectrum for narcissism. Some church members are on that spectrum as well. And that has resulted in clergy abuse and damaged congregations over the years. But in both cases, the trouble starts when someone with maladaptive narcissistic traits is not self-aware. If a person won't even look at what's going on in their own heads, it becomes impossible to change or adapt. That's not necessarily a comfortable process, but it's worth it in the long run. So going back to Donald Trump, again, politics aside, multiple juries have held that the problem is not with E. Jean Carroll's mental health or honesty. The problem is with Donald Trump's lifelong refusal to look at his own issues and adapt his own behavior. DARVO is a defense mechanism used by manipulators to evade accountability, close quote. And it's not lost on me that when we hear from a lot of the people most fiercely opposed to Unitarian Universalist diversity work, they treat accountability as a dirty word. The desire to evade accountability. Again, it is legitimate to have diverse opinions and to defend them. But when we see that term accountability used as an absolute negative, we need to ask ourselves, what is really going on here? And when we see harsh rhetoric, victim blaming, shaming, and claims of victimhood by someone who is not really a victim, that is a strong sign of what's really going on here. Or to put it a different way, whether our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles stay in our association bylaws or not after this coming June, they will remain an important expression of our religious ethics. So, what does the free and responsible search for truth and meaning even mean if that responsible piece isn't in part about being accountable? What do the worth and dignity of a person even mean if part of that worthiness isn't about being treated with respect on one side and about being accountable on the other? Being able to speak, being able to be heard. Isn't that what worthiness is? After all, the people who are not accountable under the law are children, because their brains haven't yet developed enough to make their own decisions, or people deemed mentally incompetent, again, because they can't make their own decisions. DARVO is a defense mechanism used to evade accountability, close quote. Now, I'm not in favor of judging other people's mental health. I'm not qualified, and unless you're a psychiatric professional, you're not either. But we do need to pay attention to our own actions and to the actions of others. We do need to listen to feedback when someone tells us that our actions or the actions of another have been harmful to them. That is precisely what accountability means. It means simply taking feedback seriously. So when we recognize the symptoms of denial, attack, and reversal of victim and offender, we need to pay attention to that as well. The victim of someone else's actions is not crazy or stupid or dishonest, and sometimes we need to affirm that for them. Part of our call as religious liberals is to name the truth when we see the truth, and sometimes lives may even depend on it. Amen. May it be so. And I invite you to help close our service by standing as your body and spirit are inclined, and joining in hymn number 1028 in the teal hymnal, the green hymnal, The Fire of Commitment. And I hope I haven't harmed our wonderful pianist, because this thing is murder to play on the piano.
We can sit for a second and take a deep breath. I love coming to hear him. He's brilliant. And he lost me in the very beginning because I am a victim of domestic violence. So it's years of therapy, years of Al-Anon, years of spiritual direction that allow me to come up here and say to those people out there that have had this in your life to please call me or email me, to take in your heart the fact that the reason I'm here is because of you, the beloved community that I belong to. This happened years ago to me, and when he described it so succinctly, it came right back home to me. And I do have PTSD, regardless of how much work I have done. But in our culture, we don't talk about death. We don't talk about domestic violence. And I'm not asking you to do that out loud, but I'm simply saying, I hear you. If you got lost after the initial part of his sermon, I hear you. And I'm going to have to go back and listen to the rest of his sermon because it was brilliant. But he's a man. I'm sorry. And when my ex-husband came to my house in my 20s when he heard that I was pregnant, we were broken up. He said, "Oh, Mame, I'm so sorry." And then he punched me in the face and said, "I'll do anything I can to help you." That's exactly what he was talking about. And that's the life I lived for more than 10 years. So I want to lift up in prayer the fact that we have this open microphone, this open forum, and this man that's introduced a spectrum of domestic violence, narcissism. I mean, it all goes together. And so please take in your heart of hearts that if in fact this has impacted you, you're in a loving and a safe community with a man who's opened a portal and a resource here that I would like to offer to you. I'll look up every resource in Cincinnati and find help for you because it's out there and because I love you. Blessed be. Shalom.
There are times I'm so deeply grateful for this religious tradition, and moments like this is one of them. Thank you so much, Mary. Caring is not necessarily understanding. And yeah, I'm a man. Thank you again. And actually, that is relevant to our closing words, and Jane is going to extinguish the chalice. If knowledge is power, then what is feeling? If knowledge is the currency of technology and discovery, is not feeling the currency of human interaction? If knowledge is the seed of achievement, then is not feeling the seed of perception, the questing for insight at the edge of our human limitations? How unwise would we be to pursue the one without the other? And I will go in peace. Blessed be, and amen.